Takt op.Destiny episode 10 is finally here, and I actually can't help but feel perfectly whelmed by this episode. Not a bad episode by any stretch of the imagination, but it's also not one of the best episodes either, and I think that's partly due to there being so many death flags around Lenny and Tatatan. So we're going to talk a lot about why I feel that way, but as well, a lot of the other stuff that was happening in this episode, because there is so much worth discussing. So let's go ahead and jump right into the video. So one of my favorite threads of this episode was Lenny's relation to Takt's father. I forget what they called him, but basically his nickname was the Rooster. Last name is Asahina, of course, because he's an Asahina. But I really love this thread throughout the episode, and I think that's just because it was really good. It was really well handled and really well done. Lenny is this kind of guy that was captivated by his work, and thus he became Lenny's sensei, so to speak, and the partnership really made a lot of sense in my eyes, and it's actually something that I kind of wish we got to see more of. And if maybe some of these early episodes were able to focus a little bit more on Lenny's relationship with Takt's father, I think this would have come less out of left field. But even then, like, it's actually not a bad part of the episode. It gives a lot of depth and personality to Lenny's character, and by the end of the episode I was kind of like, oh, like, wow, that's like really brilliant the way they did it. I especially love this whole thing about his connection to Takt. Even as a kid, he was there. He saw Takt's father's death. He was like literally watching Takt cry as, you know, he looked at his father who was murdered and killed by Sagan. So it was really cool stuff, and it gave a lot of motivation for Lenny's character to go out and do what he had to do, and that is essentially become Tatatan's master, or maestro, or whatever. It's master at this point. Come on, guys. That brings us to the Lenny and Tatatan stuff in the part of his backstory. And this was, once again, I felt perfectly whelmed by this, and I think that's just because of the dialogue that was said between the two when they first met. It was immediately like, why aren't you smiling, Lenny? And Lenny's like, I can't smile. And then Tatatan's like, well, I'll smile for you. For the both of us. And Lenny's like, no, let's make a promise. We'll smile for each other. All held hands and had happy fun times. Yeah, I don't know how to feel about that. Not for the message of the scene in general. I think the message is perfectly fine. It's just, I don't know, it's kind of played out, and I felt like, well, okay, I guess this is where we're going with this, and that's totally fine. Once again, this is not bad, it's just standard kind of stuff, and I think that contributes to why I felt this episode was whelming, if that makes sense. I do find it interesting how Lenny and Sagan had a relationship before, and really, Sagan is the whole reason that Lenny is a maestro to begin with. The reason I think this is so interesting is actually just really simple, because if you think about it, the reason I think this is so interesting is simply because, well, they had this long history and storied connection between the two, and it almost came back to bite Sagan. I mean, Sagan looked pretty in control. I mean, he has hell and heaven with him, which we'll talk about that later. I have some comments about that. Yeah, and it almost came back to bite Sagan in the ass, and sure enough, it didn't, thankfully. But the whole thing there is that, well, I mean, I think Lenny's character from the very beginning was just made to die in this moment. And once again, I think that I really like this episode. I want to say this now. I really, really like this episode. I enjoyed it, but I'm not going to be like super hyper excited in this video because this is perfectly whelming. like this is all stuff that I expected. This is like the most generic episode of Takt op.Destiny I've seen. And that's not a bad thing. It's just there's not super like much to talk about here. So we've talked about these tropes before in a million other of my videos with other anime, especially anime like Takt. So I guess really the big takeaway here, in my opinion, is really just this showed to me that Lenny was just made to die from the very beginning. This was another shonen-like episode where you get the backstory of the character that everybody really enjoys that goes ada ada. After the backstory is over, the character dies. And we knew from like 4 or 5 episodes ago, like, I think we knew from the very beginning, actually, now that I think about it, that Lenny and Titan were going to pretty much die. Like, these characters were never meant to stick around, never were meant to be anything more than really an emotional prop for Destiny and Takt to eventually, I don't know, reawaken their powers or get their motivation back or something. Although, really, I feel like this death didn't even really need to happen in the manner it did or when it did, because what is there for Takt and Destiny to be motivated by this death? Because, and this is if this is why they did it, of course, because they may have done it for different reasons, but let's say if that is the case and they're gonna go with that, well, like, they had their motivation already. Like we saw from Anna in this episode, Anna's like, wow, Destiny attack, they're a little bit closer, and even Titan and Lenny were teasing them on going out on dates and stuff like that and how close they are. I don't know what the point of Lenny's death was in the context of this episode. Of course, obviously, we still have 2 more episodes to go before the series is over, or maybe 3. So we still have some time to develop what these 2 characters' deaths mean. But yeah, I don't know. It was what it was, I guess. Like, literally. Like, that is my takeaway. It was what it was. Huh. I don't got anything more to say about that. That's strange. I do have one really big annoyance, and it's the same annoyance that I had with a couple episodes ago when Lenny and Titan first showed up in the mountains. I am really tired of Hell's shtick. I'm not gonna lie. I don't think it's going anywhere. I don't think it adds anything to the series. I think it actually detracts, and that is because she has remained a static character throughout all of this. And I understand, like, oh, he's a supervillain, SeaTactics. Like, she's supposed to be evil and fit this archetype. Well, sure, I get that, and I wouldn't want her to change, you know, her attitude of being a bad guy or have this big character arc and focus all this time on her. I'm not asking for that. Really, what I think I'm asking for is something a little bit different than just the same old, I get off on pain and I'm really crazy and I say really crazy things and I have an ara voice. I don't like it. I mean, I like it, but I don't like it in this way, through this delivery that the series and this episode gave us. It's really annoying. It's already played out, and we're only 10 episodes into the series. We have 2 or 3 more episodes to go, and I am through with this character. It's so bad that when Heaven pushes Hell out of the way of the big gates of shotgun blast, I'm gonna call it the gates of shotgun, because it reminded me of the gates of Babylon, which is really kind of what it was in many ways. Or no, it's like what is Archer's big attack that he uses against Lancer and UBW? I forget. Somebody put it in the comments below. It reminds me of that as well. But either way, I was really mad when they pushed Hell out of the way of the big blast that Titan did, because I was like, man, I don't even like Heaven. Like, I don't have any inkling of caring about Heaven's character at all because we don't know anything about her, which I have some theories on her in a second, but I would have rather much had Hell die than Heaven, because, you know, at least Heaven's blue, I guess, and has long hair, and we don't know much about her. I just don't like Hell. Though I will say there's some pretty cool stuff about Heaven, I guess, that I can glean off this episode. I think the way this is going with her character is that since she pushed Hell out of the way, I have this sinking feeling. It's not a sinking feeling. It's a feeling tucked away in the back of my brain crevices that says Heaven is going to turn on Sagan. The reason I think that is really just because we don't know much about Heaven. That's it. And I feel like with the way this series is going, I feel like if Heaven, plus her name's Heaven, I mean, come on, you got Heaven and Hell, like, yeah, I guess, you know, you could do the whole thing where it's super edgy and Heaven and Hell are both evil. At this point, I think I'm 60-40, 60 in favor of Heaven being a good guy by the end of this series. That's what I will say. Whether she turns on him or not, we'll see. I mean, there's also the thing that Heaven works with Lot, so we saw that in the previous episode, and initially that made me think, oh, well, Lot's doesn't know she's working for an evil company, and Heaven is, you know, a part of that. But then I got to thinking as well after this episode, well, maybe it's the other way around. Maybe it's Sagan is just an evil guy working at a good company and trying to manipulate everything, and Heaven is waiting for the right opportunity or something. Yeah, they're also gonna have to come up with a good explanation for that if they go through with that, because Thankfully, I'm not a writer on this series. Yeah, that's my theory, I guess. I will say though, Sagan does look like one of those 90s rogue visual novel protags, like straight up. If you guys ever played Divvy Dead, he looks exactly like the guy from Divvy Dead. No doubts about it, no doubts. And then we get to Lenny's death, which was just disappointing, honestly. I think it was extremely disappointing. Through the grand scheme of what this episode was trying to tell and what the story so far has been trying to tell, we knew it was going to happen. And there is nothing wrong with knowing it's going to happen. I think, I think of great series that are obvious and they're still great. Nobody is going to complain that a story is very obvious. That's what makes a show and a series and a story satisfying, is if it's something you're expecting as a reader or viewer. In this case, it was obvious, and I felt like they didn't do a good enough job of delivering us the obvious goods that we were obviously waiting for, obviously. He just kind of dies. He gets shot by Heaven in the back like 5 or 6 times defending Takt, and it wasn't really epic. It wasn't really big. Like Titan's like big Titan blast was pretty cool, but as for Lenny's death, I don't know. It was there and it happened, and I liked Lenny's backstory more than I did Lenny's death, which I don't think is good. I think backstory is supposed to make you go, oh wow, his death is more impactful, right? But his backstory just made me want to learn more about his backstory. And it made me go, oh, Lenny's backstory has made me very sad about his death. I mean, yeah, sure, it's sad he's dead. Sure, it's sad that Titan is dead or whatever. I just don't care, you know? Like, at the end of this, I'm like, okay, on to the next. Like, his death really means nothing to me. And it could have. That's the thing. It definitely could have. It just didn't. And really, I have nothing else to say about the episode. It was good. It was a good episode. Don't get me wrong. I'm just extremely disappointed by it. I hope I don't get a lot of hate for this, because honestly, it's just one of those episodes that happened, and I'm just really disappointed by the way they chose for this episode to go. That's about it. Other than that, I think the episode's fine. It's solid. And I think that's why I'm disappointed by it, is because it's just another solid episode, and I wanted a little bit, something a little bit more. We'll say that. So, is what it is. Put down in the comments below what you guys thought about this episode. Were you extremely disappointed? Did you really enjoy it? I thought I was going to have a lot more energy for this video, but this episode really just drained my energy. I don't know, that was weird. I just had a cup of coffee too. It's strange. While we wait for next week's episode of Takt op.Destiny, if you haven't already, check out my videos, just my seasonal videos. I'll put a playlist to all the seasonal stuff that I've been doing, so if you missed it, there you go. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye-bye.